Welcome everyone, welcome to It's All For You Demon, celebrating the fun of amusement parks? Yes, amusement parks today. Taking a slight venture off of KISS for the day and celebrating amusement parks. I am a huge amusement park fan. I love roller coasters. I love the smell of theme parks. I love the sights, the sounds. It is 1970s Americana at its best, and it still exists in our world today, so I celebrate it. And the fact that KISS made a movie in an amusement park is even better. Today, I am tracking down my history with Worlds of Fun in Kansas City. Worlds of Fun was a destination every summer my entire childhood. My sister's heyday would have been like 1980. My heyday would have been like 1985. I rode my first roller coaster, summer 1985, the Orient Express. Being a complete nerd and even wearing the shirt today. Gotta celebrate this stuff. So I have wanted to do this for a number of years. I have wanted to return to Worlds of Fun and try to find fragments of the history of my childhood that still may remain in that park, from where a roller coaster used to be to possibly buildings that still exist from my heyday, my sister's heyday, my family's heyday of going to Worlds of Fun every summer. So I hope you tag along with me on this kind of quest for historical nostalgia. We will return to our normal KISS programming with the next vlog. This is just something I have to do. It is a burning desire, quest inside of me. I have to do it. Plus, I think it's gonna be a whole lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy it as well. Last note, nothing I say in this vlog is information that I have discovered. This is all pre-existing information that's out there on the internet. I am just borrowing it and filtering it through my own memories and my own childhood to hunt down the spots that I remember from when I was a kid. Hats off and thank you to Worlds of Fun org blog. That blog is relentless on their historical information, and I got a lot of information from that website that led me in the directions I'm going to take today. So today, tracking down the history of Worlds of Fun, my childhood, my sister's childhood, nostalgia. It's like National Lampoon's Vacation. First one's here, Russ. First one's here. And this is it. This is the first destination of fun that you looked for coming down to Kansas City. You looked for the Worlds of Fun water tower. And there was a time in high school, I don't know why, Danny and I would quote Michael Richards from UHF, and when you first saw the water tower, you would say, "Free toy inside, free toy inside." I have no idea why, but that was nerd fun, and I still do it to this day. In the 80s, late 70s, 80s, they had a tram system that took you from the parking lot to the gate. They got rid of the tram system sometime in the 80s, I believe. They were front-facing trams, which was odd because people could easily just fall out. I think a lot of parks got rid of their tram systems just due to liability. The trams would take patrons to an entrance that no longer exists. So I'm going to use an old map right now and try to scope out that entrance. I don't know if it's still there or not, but we shall see. So here's a map of the park in 1985. Right here is the tram, and the tram would drop people off right here in Americana, which they've closed that exit a long time ago now. Everyone enters the park down by where the balloon is. So I'm going to try to find this loop and that entrance over there on Americana as I walk in. I don't even know if you can access it anymore. Gonna give it the old college try. Currently everyone enters the park over here. However, judging by roads alone, the way the parking lot is, I am semi-thinking that this entrance here And the road that stretches over here would have been the Tram Dropoff in the 80s. They would have brought you from the parking lot, brought you up here, taking you down that road, and dropped you off in the Americana section. Again, this is only a guess as the parking lot has changed, but this may be the old 1980s Tram Dropoff. Those trams were so much fun. Now back in the 70s, the first ride you would see coming into the park was the Shoosh Boomer. I never rode it back then, but it scared the bejesus out of me just seeing it. And it was located here, where the carousel is today. Now another amazingly fun ride that no longer exists at the park was the Ski Hoss, or Sky High, and it was those little carts that would take you in the air all the way across the park. The buildings for that ride are located in two sections of the park, Americana and Scandinavia. Now the Ski Hoss has been removed from the park for quite some time, but the rumor is that the buildings for those rides, the motor and the counterweight buildings, still exist to this day. So I do have pictures of the Ski Hoss, and I'm going to try to find those buildings today. Judging by an old map, the theater in Scandinavia is located here, and right next to it is the motor for the Sky Hoss. And right here is the theater. So I believe the old Sky Hoss motor building would have been this building here. You have the theater in Scandinavia and what appears to be the Sky Hoss motor building. The Viking Voyager was my first kind of ever thrill ride. It was a water ride, but it was the first ride I had rode that had a drop. And the drop is pretty lame, especially if you ride it now. But back then, scared me to death. I'm glad that this ride still exists to this day. Now what is now the Nordic Chaser used to be a ride, the only ride I would never ride at Worlds of Fun. And it was a ride called the Finnish Fling. And it was here from 1973 to 2017. And it was this, basically a barrel that you walked into, stood next to the wall, and it spun around at a very fast rate, and the floor would drop, and you would get sucked to the wall, suspended in midair. Never rode it because I always heard a rumor that if a kid threw up, their puke would also stick to the wall. And if you happened to be next to said kid, the puke would stick on you. But it was right here, the Finnish Fling, and I never rode it. I don't regret not ever riding it. It's just not my thing, but it's sad to see it go. I mean, that ride was here from 1973 when the park opened until 2017. That is awesome. Next up on the memory list is the Octopus. I remember riding this as a kid, and I just remember being terrified of this ride, and I don't know if it was its demeanor, its black paint job with those yellow flashing lights. I just always was terrified of it and held on for dear life whenever I rode it. It is no longer here. It is now located in Valley Fair in Minnesota, a park I was just at this summer, and had I done my homework earlier, I would have looked for this ride and really celebrated its history being at Valley Fair. But missed opportunities, did not do my homework in time, but I love the Phantom of the Park association with the Octopus. You're testing them out with people on them? Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe for a long time in the 80s, the Octopus was located here where the Scrambler is. The Scrambler has been here for quite some time, but I do believe for a brief time in the 80s, the Octopus was located here. Now for a long time in the 80s, this used to be the shooting gallery, and this was where you would put a quarter in and shoot those air guns at a piano player, a gorilla, a Pepsi can or a Coke can, a bunny rabbit, and they would move when you hit the sensor. Shooting gallery has been removed. It was a great time in the 70s and 80s, especially for little kids like me who did not ride roller coasters. The shooting gallery was fun. Shooting gallery is also, or this building is also now used for a petting zoo during Winterfest with billy goats galore. Now it is a tiki photo opportunity, but back then we would line up and waste our money shooting these guys. Now from 1973 to 1978 there was this ride called the Safari, which was kind of like a lay taxi where you would drive around these vehicles. They closed it because people would jump out of their Jeep halfway through the ride and leave an abandoned car. Judging by this picture, the track ran underneath this bridge between the Zulu and the Prowler. Zulu is located here. The Prowler is off in the distance, and that bridge would have been the bridge that the Safari track ran under. So right here where this sidewalk is today would have been the Safari track from 1973 to 1978. History revealed. The Zulu just spins upside down, and when Danny used to ride this in the 80s, he used to pretend like he was Tommy Lee in the Wild Side video. Little known facts. This is something I have no recollection of at all. It was only here from 77 to 80. It was Pygmy Playhouse. It was a puppet show, but this building with these pegs sticking out and kind of the center that rises still exists, and it's a pretzel place now. And the building is right here. This ride that is called the Boomerang was once home to a very beloved ride here at Worlds of Fun called the Zambezi Zinger. Now the Zambezi Zinger lasted from 1973 to 1997, but this was the old entrance to the Zambezi Zinger, which is now the entrance to the Boomerang. And for the longest time in high school, Danny and I enjoyed the Zambezi Zinger because one day we heard the guy loading the ride telling everyone to stand behind a yellow line, and when it was time to board the train he just said, "Steppin'," and we still say "Steppin'" to this day. But it's odd to think how many times we boarded this roller coaster, and it's right there. Vinnie Vincent is back. Now here's a little trip down memory lane. So in the 80s, if you were a one-hit wonder, you would come to Worlds of Fun and do like a concert, like Tiffany and stuff like that. So here would have been the spotlight booth, or maybe like the soundboard, and ran, of course, all the lighting, I'm sure. And then here are all the bleachers. The kids would gather to listen to their favorite one-hit wonder pop star. Since been closed because of the Mamba back there. Accessibility is not easy anymore, so they closed it off. No more concerts here at Worlds of Fun. The music has ended. But this storage building up here now becomes a haunted house at Halloween time. So I don't know what they do with these bleachers. I don't know if it's part of the haunted house. The lines for those haunted houses are ridiculous, so I've never really been to one. I do come to the haunt all the time, just never really go in the haunted houses because I don't have 2.5 hours to wait to have the life scared out of me. Audio aids. Nice touch. So I've located the Counterweight building of the Ski Hoss or Sky High, and it is this building here, barn looking building with that top structure on the building with the 5 slats, and it is that building right there that was the counterweight for the Ski Hoss or Sky High. You can see that top piece still exists with the 5 slats, and to this day you can still see that side part of the barn to the right is where games are played now. That's pretty awesome. It's locating that kind of history that makes this whole day worth it. That's pretty fun. There was a haunted house here, and it was kind of like rooms were slanted, and it was kind of hard to walk through, and it was just kind of bizarre. Just not scary, but just odd feeling inside. One terrifying thing about the haunted house here was at the entrance there was a barrel with like an arm that would circle in it, and I just remember being freaked out by that as a kid, but then fascinated by it as I grew older and into the 80s. I would love to know where that barrel and arm are now. The haunted house no longer exists, but the building that it was in still exists today. So this building here would have been the old haunted house in the 80s, and I just noticed out front of Cyclone Sadie's antique photos are barrels. So you have to wonder, are these the barrels that scared me as a child with the arm circulating in them and fascinated us as elementary school kids? Are these the same barrels from the 80s that once terrified and fascinated us inside the Worlds of Fun haunted house? That's pretty awesome from my family's history of this park to think maybe those are the barrels. That's pretty fun to think about. Now, when I was little in the 80s, there was an attraction here called the Incredidome. And it was basically just like a giant yellow tent with like an IMAX screen inside. It'd show like these films of like a plane flying through the Grand Canyon, or like a fire truck racing through the streets of Paris. And it would come to a screeching halt right in front of a baby carriage. You would stand and watch these movies, and it would kind of throw off your equilibrium. Later on, they made it where you had to sit down. They ended up taking it down sometime in the mid-80s, but the cement pad where the Incredidome used to exist still exists to this day using a 1979 map, and I'm going to try to locate where the Incredidome was. Using this map as a guide and the red barn building that we determined was the Ski Hoss, the amphitheater for the train station is directly down from that barn, and right across from that would have been the Incredidome. So technically it is right across from where the train amphitheater is, would have been the Incredidome. So I need to find this hunk of grass to locate the old Incredidome. So here is the train station. Here is the train station amphitheater. So the Incredidome would have been right across from here in this grass. And boom, I found it. It would have been right here where that brick is, right in that circle, would have been the Incredidome, because for a while the Scrambler was housed there. Obviously no ride is housed there anymore, but prior to the Scrambler being there, it was the Incredidome. So right there is where I saw a man fall and laughed, and I believe I got in trouble by my parents, but it was also kind of terrifying because I felt like I was gonna fall over too, but it was just funny to see a grown man fall. The Incredidome, right there. Here is a conception photo of what the Incredidome was, but it was basically this giant yellow ball that you went inside and watched like an IMAX theater on. The screen went from the ground all the way up to the middle of the dome, and it really was like a 3D encompassing IMAX experience. And it would have been right there. That's awesome. Now, I mentioned earlier that my heyday of Worlds of Fun was like 1984, 85. My sister's heyday would have been 1980. And in 1976, the park opened in celebration for the bicentennial a very popular roller coaster called the Scream Roller. And what the Scream Roller had was 2 corkscrew loop-de-loops. Well, the Scream Roller was my sister's heyday roller coaster. It has now been replaced by the Timberwolf that opened when I was a freshman in high school. And the Timberwolf still exists to this day. So where this ride is today would have been the Scream Roller back in my sister's day. You can see in photos that the corkscrew turns went over water. This would have been the water that the corkscrew turns of the Scream Roller went over. And now that I look at it closer, there is no need for these gigantic cement blocks, these rocks, or these rocks. So I'm thinking at one time these were the housing cement stations for the Scream Roller's corkscrew loop-de-loop over the water. If you look at this picture of the corkscrew, the loop-de-loop goes down into the water surrounded by rocks. And I'm thinking that those rocks still exist to this day. Could be wrong, but that's pretty awesome. This is pretty awesome, but just within the last couple years, they've really started like embracing the history of the park, and they sell all these old school t-shirts with all the old rides. There's like the Orient Express, Zambezi Zinger. Yeah, look at this one. This one's awesome. It's for the Finnish Fling. 73 to 2017. Way back in the 80s, Worlds of Fun had mascots, and this is the mascot. They even made a stuffed animal of him. That's pretty awesome. Plus he looks like he has Gene Simmons makeup on. I love the tag. Now back in the day where this water is, used to house a giant boat that was built by MGM in the 50s for a movie called Showboat. And it was basically like a gift shop, but it was a giant steamboat. And it was one of the most boring attractions here as a kid because your parents would want to go in it, and it was just not exciting at all for a kid. For a parent, it would be kind of cool to go in an air-conditioned gift shop and get out of the sun, but for a kid, it was not fun. This is the water that gigantic steamboat was housed. But just last year, Worlds of Fun once again did a nod to history and opened a barbecue restaurant called the Cotton Blossom. So this is kind of cool. In the 80s, the Orient section of Worlds of Fun had a gate you would walk under, and every time we would walk under it, Danny would always make us take like a deep breath on the other side, like you were actually going into another world. Again, nerd history with Worlds of Fun. The gate's been long removed. A lot of people wanted to come back just to keep with the theming of the park, but using a picture from the past, I have located where the gate would have stood using the building in the background. And here is a picture of the Orient Gate with that building in the background with the triangle in the center. Well, if you match up where that building is right now and the triangle building in the background, the Orient Gate existed at one time here. And Danny and I would cross right here and breathe deeply when we reached the other side. I'm now in the Orient. Now here, where the Patriot is where my childhood is. On the land that the Patriot stands used to be the Orient Express. And the Orient Express was the roller coaster that my dad told me I could not leave the park without riding, and I was terrified. I remember going up on the first hill and I had my eyes shut, and he told me to open my eyes, and I did, and a love of roller coasters was born. After riding the Orient that day, he bought me a camouflage trucker hat that said, "I survived the Orient Express." Semi, hence the reason I bought this shirt. Not that sad is the right word, but I always kind of get a little nostalgic knowing that the roller coaster that made me fall in love with roller coasters once stood in this grass where the Patriot now is. You used to pull up in this parking lot, look off into this grass at this red beast. That was so much fun to ride. Things have to change, but it's always fun to go back and reminisce nostalgia. Devereaux would be proud.